Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Grown B, and I have my training partner and one of my best friends, Xflow Sensei, here on the Kombocast, and we're going to be talking about everything fighting games, from the culture to how it may have affected us as people, how it helps build character, what are some of our favorite games, what are some of our biggest disappointments, what got us into fighting games, and just really kind of explore this genre in a way that's different than just, hey, how good are you at beating somebody else up? Or what are the best fighting games out there? Sure, those topics may come up here and there, but there's a lot of deep exploration about the community, about any type of healing it may has done for people, like how toxic maybe have we gotten over the years. And one of the big conversations that we're going to be starting the podcast off with is whether or not the fighting game genre is actually dying off. And of course, dying off doesn't mean that we're going to look up one day and not have any more Tekken games, or look up one day and realize that, oh, we can't buy a fighting game. But fighting games have always been really popular and had their own special place within the gaming community. And it used to really kind of be something that everybody would get excited about and dive into, whether it be, casuals or some people that are really good. But now it just seems like people in more casual sense are drifting away from fighting games, and we'll probably be able to dive deeper into that as we go throughout this combo cast. But we're going to be able to get started in having some of these conversations. So what do you think, X?
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to talk about this. I think we are at potentially a turning point whenever it comes to fighting games, just for stuff that's to come into the future. Just like the balance between the hardcore fans and the casuals, finding the middle ground.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things too, and definitely one of the bigger points that I wanted to kind of unpack is it seems like there is a moment right now where both the gamers and the developers are stuck on whether or not to have these fighting games be more about the casual fun, or to have them be more about the competitive scene and more about the esports. And in a way, I feel like the esports scene has kind of really put pressure on developers and fans to kind of only play fighting games to be really good, and only play fighting games to try and rise through the ranks and be competitive. And so now the casual fun of just beating people up, right, has now kind of gone to the wayside a little bit. And we've seen this from several different games, but I think what we're seeing mostly, I think one of the better examples of this is like the identity of Sparking Zero, which is supposed to be a little bit more of kind of a party setting, gaming with your friends, having fun with your favorite characters. And this was the expectation that most people had for Sparking Zero, for it not to be kind of focused on what it was going to be for esports, or focused on preparing for competitive tournaments. But then, as more and more people got their hands on the game, we see some of the more traditional competitive players saying, oh, we want these changes, which is wrestling with the casual players saying, well, actually, I think this stuff is okay, but it is creating an experience online where people are doing this and this and this. And so it's tough, because the closer you are to the middle, it's almost like the more punishment the game itself actually receives, because you're not close enough to the casual sense for the casual gamers to be able to enjoy it, but then you're not close enough to the competitive sense for the competitive guys to even want to be involved with the game. And so now it's like, because you're playing both sides of the fence, you don't really have an audience, you don't really have a community that you are dedicated to serving. And so what I feel like is a really good game in Sparking Zero kind of suffers from that. So
Do you think do you think these developers are using the popularity of certain IPs to kind of do that though?
yeah, I think so. And
Or do you think that like some of these devs are like so based off of the certain popularity of a game, like okay, a game like Tekken, a game like Street Fighter, something that's gonna get the big push in the pro scene. These tournaments are gonna be streamed. You know what I'm saying? Like those. You think developers kind of take advantage of that?
I think that I think that what happens is when they sit down and decide that they're going to create a game, even if it's a game like Tekken, right? Where it's like a Tekken 8 or a Tekken 9 or a Street Fighter 7 or a Street Fighter 8 or whatever. I think there used to be a more organic process to just how they wanted a game to play and the experience that they wanted people to have within that game. But now I think what happens is they start building out that game, but they're also thinking, well, what's it going to look like on the esports scene? How is the way we create this game going to translate to some Evo tournament somewhere or some big combo tournament somewhere? And I think that's a consideration that may have been present in earlier generations, but it wasn't nearly as focused as it is now. And so I think that kind of messes up some of the organic artistic side of what goes into a game, right? And so that's one of the things that's frustrating for me, because I think that is a little bit more of a publisher sense that maybe probably gets pushed onto the developers a little bit more. We see this with Activision a lot. I know that's outside of the gaming scope, but we see that with Activision a lot where they are pushing a studio like Treyarch to say, hey, do this with your game. And they're saying, we don't really want to do that. But at the end of the day, the publisher is where the money is. And so I think that's happening more and more, even with some of these studios that are creating these fighting games, to where they have to kind of make certain moves and decisions that aren't necessarily in line with what they want for the game itself. And so what happens is that takes away some of the joy from some of the developers, and they kind of just end up being shells while they create the games. And it shows up in the gameplays, I think, for sure. One of the things, though, that we talked about before we started recording, or I think we were talking about this in our practice recording, is just some new wrenches and things to be kind of thrown into the system to get people excited about different things. And one of the things I feel like is missing right now is we don't have, outside of Tekken, I think we need another side-scrolling 3D type fighter that's not an arena fighter.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because we used to have at least 2 or 3 of them going at a time, right? Soul Calibur, Tekken,
Dead or Alive.
but now it seems like, hey, that type of game is mainly just Tekken, and then we're seeing a lot more arena fighters. And honestly, I wouldn't be mad if we just saw some more 2D fighters kind of pop into the scene as well. I think we brought up, do we need to see the next generation of what Tekken and what MK and those games are supposed to be? Like, who are going to be the next generation that is essentially the Demon Slayer and the Attack on Titan of anime, right? Where, Dragon Ball and One Piece, and Pokemon and these things have always been at the top. They've always been what people recognize as like anime. But there's also new ones that are coming up that people are really excited about, that people are having a lot of conversations about. And even if you're not necessarily knocking some of these other ones off the throne, you're still occupying a space that keeps the genre exciting. And so, man, I really wish that Bloody Roar would just find a way to come back. I think that was a really good fighting game, maybe it was just a really fun fighting game. Who knows? People's standards of what good is, right, is so crazy now. But man, that game was fun, and I loved just getting in there, boxing, and then transforming, and having a new ultimate move and a new ability attached to kind of this. It's almost like you had 2 different characters, right? Similar to what we see kind of in Sparking Zero. You got your base Goku, he has his own separate moves. Super Saiyan Goku has his separate moves. But man, and and I think what excited me most about that is you could pick your favorite character, but it was also like what transformation that they had. Like my favorite animal is a leopard, so I think Shiva was the one who transformed into a leopard. So I've always was excited about using her. So any game where you get to kind of mix some of your favorite things together, I feel like are going to be like really strong in kind of the fighting game genre, like tapping into multiple things that people can get excited about. You know.
Yeah, that's awesome. I never got a chance to play in Bloody Roar, but all the stories you say, you tell about it, man.
Man, what do you think about one of the, I was thinking about saving this discussion maybe for a different podcast, but I've really been thinking about ranked in a lot of different fighting games. And a lot of people have even been saying that, for example, with Sparking Zero, that there shouldn't be a ranked mode in Sparking Zero. That Sparking Zero is not the type of game to have a ranked mode, right? Because again, it's not about this kind of high competitive scene. It's just about playing with your favorite characters, trying to recreate some anime moments. Like it's more about experiencing the anime, and with that comes like, hey, Jiren, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, Vegito. These characters are going to be really strong, really powerful. And if you want to use somebody like Krillin or Chaozu against them, you're going to be at a disadvantage because they kind of stay a little bit more lore accurate. And so with that, people are saying to stay in line with that, they shouldn't have put like a ranked mode. But I also have been thinking about ranked in general and what type of effect I think it has on the community. And I think it puts people in this state where they become very desperate for winning at all cost, and even at the expense of actually trying to get better at certain games. And so even when we think about some of the systems behind ranked, just winning a couple of matches and then moving on to the next person, it's almost like you rush through these situations and these fights just to hurry up and grab your digital plaque that says you're this type of player or you're that type of player. And even when we think about ranked, I've always felt like it should be something about trying to figure out who is the better player. But I never really felt like the system really leans to that. It just leans to trying to win as much as possible. And I think that has affected a lot of gamers in a negative way, to the point where now it's not even about having any type of fun with the with getting better. It's just about I want to be at the top of the leaderboards. And so that in one way is a little bit on the developers, but I think that's also a community issue. Like that people have not matured to an extent where, hey, we can have fun in a video game without it being strictly and solely based on wins and losses, you know? And I think ranked just fuels this idea that you're only here to win. You're only here to look like you're better than everybody else. You're only here to climb to the top of the leaderboards. And I'm seeing the frustration within the community as it relates to that. But again, I think it's something that people want to point their finger at the developers and say, well, if you fix this or you fix that, then we'll be able to have a better experience. But I think a lot of it is the community issues too.
Absolutely. And those might be some deep rooted things too, because it's like, did we forget why we all started playing video games to begin with? Like, do people actually go that far back? Like, whenever we were younger, playing video games, we probably started off playing a single player video game by ourselves, figuring it out and stuff. But eventually, it led to us playing with our friends who might have been in our school, our elementary school class or whatever, and then learning how to play video games with somebody else, whether it be like y'all were on the same team playing Smash Bros, 2v2s or free for all, whatever it may have been. Learning how to play different games with people, and then learning, okay, these are objective based. Oh, our team can win. Oh, this is every man for himself. Little small things like that. I don't know. It's just like whenever I think back to whenever I started playing video games for real, it was a little bit of it was an escape from reality, but then it was like being able to put myself in a situation and figure out how to utilize everything that's around me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I will always appreciate about fighting games on a level that that I can't get this from other games, right? There's no feeling of there's always that competitive feeling. There's always adjustments, but when it comes to fighting games, it literally feels like a chess match. And I think that's one of the things that's going to keep the fighting game genre alive more than anything because I don't think there's any other type of game that really replicates that. And so it's like I got this other person on the other end. They understand their character. They probably understand a little bit of my character. We're gonna go at it. We're gonna try to figure each other out as fast as possible. And at the end of the day, like it is me against you. And that's something that you don't get as much from a lot of other types of games. And that's fine because other games may be more team focused, right? How well can you play a particular role, right? Um, but I always have loved that aspect of fighting games, and so I think that's what's ultimately going to keep it alive. But one of the things that I think the community needs to really take a look at is can the community be satisfied when it comes to fighting games? Can the community be satisfied? And is anything really enough for people who play fighting games? And the reason why I say that is because I think about MK1. And I played MK1 and I had some fun on it. But a lot of people were talking about how it wasn't great. And ultimately, it became something of a lot like what we were talking about. Like, are the developers and is the community alienating casual gamers in favor of focusing heavily on the esports scene? And ultimately, it seems like that's what happened to MK1, where the game was in a particular place and all of the changes that were being made were really in line with people who wanted to play competitive. So all of the competitive players, like the Sonic Foxes of the world and whatnot, were like, "Oh man, this game is the best it's ever been." It's like, yeah, it's the best it's ever been for you who play professionally and win money, and you're only focused on these little things and these little aspects. But for people who just want to get on and fight and have fun, like, no, it isn't. And so I think that's a big part of it. But it also makes me think about the developers nowadays are not free to take risks and try to have fun with the games anymore. And as I was talking about before we started recording, it's like ever since MK9, every time an MK game came out, it was, oh, this is just a reskin. This is the same Call of Duty. I'm sorry. This is the same Mortal Kombat from last year. This is the same Mortal Kombat from 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whatever. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And this isn't even necessarily exclusive to fighting games. But I think what happens is if they try to stay within the tradition of what they've done, then the community complains and says, "Oh, you're just giving us the same game and making us pay for it again." But then when they go outside of the box, for example, MK1 with the cameo system, if they go outside of the box, all of a sudden it's, "Oh, well, why did you add this? Why did you change this? Why did you do this? Oh, I'm not going to give this game a chance." And here's the thing. When you already put yourself in a mindset of, "Oh, this thing sucks," or "Oh, this isn't going to be fun," you're never going to really be able to give that thing an honest chance. And I think, and I'm not saying that MK1 and the cameo system was perfect or great or whatever. I would not saying it's necessarily the best MK experience. But I do think that for a lot of people that probably could have enjoyed it, never got to enjoy it because they already put a mental block in their head that said, "Oh, I don't like this new thing that the developers are trying," and so they weren't able to manifest a good time. And I think that at the end of the day, one of the struggles for the developers is the fact that I don't think a lot of gamers really know what type of game they want to play. Right? They want to be able to complain about what they have and the product that they have in their hand, but they don't know how to facilitate the proper messaging to the developers so that they even have a chance at making a good game. And so I think that's something that a lot of gamers got to take a look at. Like, is anything going to be good enough for you? And that's what I feel like is one of the biggest issues right now. And that, to me, will probably, if the fighting game genre does die off to some degree, I think that'll be it. That the community is almost impossible to satisfy at times, because if they do one thing, they get shit on. If the developers do one thing, they get shit on. If they do another thing, they get shit on as well.
And then the community doesn't want to take any accountability.
Yeah, and so that's been kind of one of the bigger struggles. I think for me is the fact that, like, people even still get on to me about when I make my Sparking Zero videos, and they want me to just throw the developers under the bus so bad with everything. And I'm like, dude, I'm not doing that. Like, a lot of the issues are community issues that if people would just chill out for a second and, you know, think about the type of experience that they want to have. Like, for example, like exploiting mechanics. A lot of times people think that just because something's in the game, you have to exploit it and you have to make it the most insufferable experience. And it's always like behind this fake guy stuff. Well, I have to do it like this so the developers know that this is an issue with the game. And it's just like, people will always find a new thing to abuse when it comes to a game. There's never going to be a perfect game that the developers are going to be able to put out. So if people just kind of stop being stuck and just say, man, let me play the game the way it's intended to be played, right? It can be a totally different experience. So, you know, spamming certain move or spamming certain abilities or always looking for some sort of hack because people are so desperate for a win, I think that ruins a lot of experiences too.
And I don't get that. It's like, why? That goes back to what I was saying. Like, I guess people forget the reason why we began playing video games to begin with. It was to have fun. Like, to have fun. How's that fun, doing that to somebody?
Yeah.
Spamming or showing off an exploit. Okay, we get it. We got it after the first few times you showed us. Why are you gonna keep doing that? And then you're doing that on the world stage. People are looking to try to see a competitive match going on. I don't know. It's going too far.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, I think we've gotten to a point where people just take things over the top. It's like you were saying. People just kind of take things a little bit too far. And I think a lot of the issues that go on when it comes to the gaming community can be solved within the community, right? One of the things I was talking about in one of my Sparking Zero videos was that one of the reasons why people, before they fixed it where... because people kept leaving matches in Sparking Zero and not having to take any penalty. And don't get me wrong, I think those people are lame, right? And I understand that the developers probably should have had something in place initially to kind of penalize those people and award the person who stayed the victory. Yeah, like, I get that. But there's also another element of that. And the other element of that is that we have put so much stock in winning and quote unquote getting good that people just decided, okay, well, I'm going to at all costs just try to make sure that I win or make sure that my record is good, right? And so people couldn't even complain about little issues when it comes to a game and say, hey man, I don't think that this is fair, or hey, I think this is a little unbalanced. And here come all of the people saying, "Oh, well, you just got to get good at the game. Oh, well, you suck at the game."
Yeah,
Skill issue, right? So what that does is that puts people in a mindset that says, "Okay, I have to get my rank up really, really high. I have to try to figure out how I'm gonna win, right? And I have to win at all costs." So that's where the spamming comes in. That's where, oh, I'll hack or I'll use a lag switch. I'll do anything to make sure that I win at the end of the day so that people can't make fun of me for not winning. And so those are things that I feel like can be changed within the culture, right? Maybe stop putting so much emphasis on winning, right? Maybe instead of always trying to make someone feel bad for not winning, or kind of like what we do with Rainy, right? We was like, hey, do you want to kind of get better at the game? Right? Okay, cool. So then we start training and we start saying, okay, this is why I'm doing this. I want you to be able to see a pattern in this situation, right? It's like everybody wants to be better than someone for the sake of being able to say, look how great I am compared to you.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be in that position and say, hey, let me help you get to my level. Because at the end of the day, if you really like fighting games for real, you know that if someone else becomes better, it gives you a chance to be better. Mm-hmm. If I'm just sitting here pummeling you into the ground and going, aha, yeah, look how good I am, there's a ceiling to how good I'm going to be able to be. But if I can, it's just like Rich used to say. Rich used to say, every time I teach you how to do something, it gives me more options to use against you, right? Because I know that you understand how to approach this move or approach this situation, I can now play off the fact that you have that knowledge,
yep.
Right? The mind games, if you will. And that's fun, dude. That's so fun to me. That's so much fun, and it goes back to what we talked about a couple of months ago. There's two types of fighting game players: people that just want to beat people up. So if they sit there and get flawless victories all the time, if they can jam you into a corner, if they can exploit a move that they know you don't understand, they'll do it, right? But eventually, that's not fun to me. Eventually, I want that challenge, and I want that thrill and that exhilaration that says, "Oh man, I want this win, but this person is in my way," right? And they want to win too, and they can win. Mm-hmm. And so instead of just being able to beat the same person over and over and over again and laugh about it and say, "Look at me," it's like, man, I take that person and say, man, if I help this person get better and they get to my level, that can possibly propel me to the next level and the level after that and the level after that. But again, nobody talks about this stuff from a community and a culture standpoint. That's stuff that the developers can't make you think in a healthy way like that. They can't make you think in a challenging way like that. So it frustrates me that people try to position the developers as the solution to all their problems, and the developers are probably a solution to 30% of your problems as it relates to the experiences that you're having in the game.
Isn't that such a good feeling though, like knowing that you and your opponent are both just going back and forth, like both getting better in real time at the same time, bro? This used to happen so many times on Injustice 2 ranked online, bro. Like, so whenever you and I wouldn't be playing, I'd be playing online, I would always make new friends. I got to a point where I would make new friends, right? It'd be somebody that would either be on the mic or I just knew that we were getting into it, like just going back and forth, and then we would be sending messages. Next thing I know, I got somebody I'm playing like regulars with, and it's just all based off of us just in that moment, bro, just pushing each other.
Yeah.
And just realizing like, yo, I might lose here, but it's okay because I see where this person's at. I see that's where I'm trying to get. I know he's not going to make it easier for me. That makes it even better,
Yeah. And I think that's the thing too. Like, a lot of it is the culture of the fighting games and the fact that that casual play is just really being snuffed out One, by the over competitiveness, but two, there's just not a lot of joy to be injected into the fighting game experience because of how much focus people have put on, hey, you, the game is fun if you're winning and it's terrible if you're losing. Right? I have so many fun matches. Even when we used to go at it in both Sparking Zero and Fighters and Mortal Kombat, like our losses were fun, you know. And so I think ultimately the community has to get around to this place where like winning isn't absolutely the end all be all and everything. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things on both sides. On one hand, I feel like there's just a lot of community healing that needs to happen. Maybe you grew up and your brother never let you win, or you could never beat your brother because he wouldn't teach you what you needed to know about a game to win. Um, and but then at the same time, there's the developer side, and I'm not absolving the developers from everything. But there is a piece of this that's like, hey, stick to the identity that you want to create for a game. If it's going to be a competitive game, let it be a competitive game. If it's going to be built for esports, let it be built for esports. But I think the struggle and the issue that we could be running into is the alienation of the casual audience. And as much as I love like the core fighting game community, the ones that just really like to get in there and scrap, that get excited about the intensity of, they can't carry the fighting game genre indefinitely. You need casual gamers in order for the community to be able to thrive the way that it should.
True.
And I don't think that right now the developers have a commitment to the casual audience right now. And ultimately, I think that if they don't get that in check, again, it's not like we're going to wake up tomorrow. There's just not going to be any fighting games in development. But I feel like the fighting game community has had a solid foot in just the gaming community itself, right? And I think it's getting pushed further and further back from that. I don't think it's ever going to be something like, hey, it's up there with first-person shooters. I think first-person shooters are always going to be the most dominant gaming genre. But fighting games used to have a solid hold on where their footing was, and now I think like MMOs and MOBAs and other type of tactical team fighters and all these other things have been just kind of getting more and more popular. And now, like, fighting games aren't even really a household game anymore. You used to be able to, if there was a gaming console in somebody's house, they had at least one fighting game. Now, I don't think that that's the case. I think a lot of people have fighting games completely dismissed, really, from their gaming life, right? No matter how big or small. And if that continues, right, I do think that the fighting game genre can kind of be a shell of itself, which is effectively kind of like dying off. So, I don't know.
Maybe they should bring back Def Jam. Bring back Def Jam. Bring back Fight Night.
Man, hey.
Bring those. Well, I saw that there's some game that's kind of like Fight Night. It's Undisputed. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I used to play the mess out of Fight Night.
I see those more as sports games than like a traditional fighting game.
Wouldn't you say like that's how I look at fighting games though, as sports? Yes. That's what I'm saying. Whenever I grew up, bro, whenever I got to middle school and I got to try out for the football team, the basketball team, and all that, my competitive mindset really started to click in, bro. I was like, okay, I might be on the B team right now. I'm going to be on A team in 2 games. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Me, I never played like Pop Warner football, so I started off on the B team in middle school and immediately after a couple games, bro. So it's just that's how I see fighting games. It's more sport oriented.
Yeah.
So yeah, Call of Duty gets its tournaments and it's esports. I get it. That's team sport game. But whenever it comes to like the fighting thing, it's like you're in control of your team. You're the commander in chief. Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
1-on-1 or 3v3, whatever game you're playing, you know.
Yeah. All in all, I think just to kind of close things off, the fighting game community has subgenres within it, and I think that one thing that I think gamers have to do is they have to be able to identify what type of game they want to play. They have to be really conscious about what type of game that they want to play. Um, and for a lot of people who bought Sparking Zero, they probably shouldn't have bought it. For a lot of people who bought like MK1, they probably shouldn't have bought it. A lot of people who bought Tekken shouldn't have bought it. I think what happens is people want to be um, in in the popular crowd. And so they'll buy things and they'll have these expectations of it, and they think that it'll either be one way, or they think that they can push the developers to make it a certain way. And sometimes you just can't do that, right? And so that's what I feel about a lot of the community. They don't really know what type of game they want to play, or they're not willing to look at a game and say, I don't think that this game is being made with the intentions of the game that I want to play, right? And so for me, when it comes to like Sparking Zero, and people wanting, if you want a well balanced character type game where Krillin can beat Vegito, and Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta can get beat by Videl, like sure those things can happen, but I mean, you're putting yourself at a massive disadvantage. This isn't fighters, right? Where Yamcha was a strong character for a period of time. Bardock was a strong character for a period of time, right? That's good for fighters. If you want that, play that. Still a great game. It's still a very good game, right? If you want a different type of experience, right? Where you go out with Vegito and you dominate because it's Vegito, right? Or you go out with SS4 Gogeta and you dominate because it's SS4 Gogeta, or you wanted to have that feeling of what Jiren did at the Tournament of Power, right? And so you go out and you dominate because he's super strong. Ultra Instinct Goku, super strong, right? If you want that experience, then you go and you play Sparking Zero. And you don't flip flop because, or if you can, you got to be able to turn it on and off and say, okay, I want to have a different experience. But I think the struggle that people have is they don't know how to look at a game and say, okay, this is what this game has to offer. Is this what I want to buy into? If not, don't buy it and then try to shit on it and try to say it's a bad game because they didn't make it the way that you wanted it when they weren't marketing it that in the way that you wanted it in the first place. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think that's one of the things. A lot of, in order for the fighting game community to continue to thrive and continue to hold on and not die off, is people got to get better at selecting what their experience is going to be. But the developers have to do the same thing. The developers want to play both sides. They want to make a casual comp game where casuals can get in and play a little bit and competitive players can get in and play a little bit. You got to form an identity, right? And ultimately, if they don't do that, then the game really, really suffers, right? And I think Sparking Zero is one of the better examples right now. There's some elements that are competitive, and there's some elements that are supposed to be kind of put in for some casual fun. And I think it's in a good place now for everyone, despite how much people want to complain. But again, if unchecked, right, that could really spiral, right? So it's kind of up to them just to commit to whatever that experience they want for their audience to have. You know, even if it doesn't necessarily lead to, you know, game breaking DLC sales and whatnot, they got to be able to commit to that. But there's definitely a combination of wanting some competitiveness, but not alienating that casual audience. And it's something that other genres have kind of figured out. And again, right? For example, I'll say Call of Duty. I used to like Call of Duty for certain things, right? They wanted to appeal to a more casual audience, which introduced some elements that I kind of don't like as much. I don't play Call of Duty as much, but it's been able to survive longer as a result of being able to do that. And so I think fighting games will probably go on a similar route. Any final thoughts?
That's a good point. I could see fighting games going that route too. It sucks, It's something I guess our age group has to deal with the most.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think again the competitiveness. I think there's a balance between healthy competition. There's a balance between healthy competition and then only worried about the result, right? Who wins, who loses, and then attaching the excitement or attaching the joy of a game specifically to that end result.
It's like adding, I don't know, like an extra layer to what, like, your thinking is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Whenever you're playing the game while you're playing the game.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like making active choices and stuff like that. So I guess some people aren't really like accustomed to doing that, to actually changing their thinking.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of thinking has to change. But we'll continue to break down conversations like this, and we'll continue to see how it goes. Because I love fighting games. Like I said, I don't think that they're going anywhere. But even if they're just not as popular, and even if there's not as many games, I'll be on the games that there are, because I just like what it adds to my character. I like what it adds to my, my brand of wisdom. How I connect with people, and so. This has been our first episode of the Kombocast. What do you guys think? Do you think that the fighting game genre is dying off? If you do think that it's dying off, why is that? And whose responsibility do you think it is to kind of pick this thing up and make sure that it smoothly translates into the next generation? Any fighting games on the horizon that you think are being able to move into that spot where maybe Mortal Kombat isn't doing as well, or Tekken, or Street Fighter. I know these games still have a firm hold in what the fighting game community looks like, but when I looked at MK1 and I think they said, okay, we're not going to be doing any servicing for it, or I guess any more updates. It's like, wow, maybe two real DLCs for MK1 for it to be out after that is pretty surprising, unless they got Injustice 3 on the horizon. But even then, I'm shocked because Injustice 2 was popular and we haven't seen Injustice 3 in a really long time. So who knows? But hey, make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you guys leave your comments and your thoughts. And maybe we can read these out and address some of these things in the comments of the next podcast. My name is Grown B.
X.
And we'll see y'all next time.